In this video we will have a look at loops in C. Loops are implementations in C language that will allow us to repeat a certain block of statements upon a given condition. So we're going to check if this condition is true, and as long as it is true, we'll continue to repeat operations of a block of statements. The first loop is the while loop. In this loop, we are going to check a condition, and if it is true, we are going to execute this block of statements. However, if it is false, we are going to exit the loop. So the execution of these statements depends on the logic value of the condition. If it is true, the statement will be executed, and if it is false, we'll leave this loop. The format for write the while loop is the reserved word while, then two parentheses that will hold the test condition or the statement to be tested, and within these curly braces the statements to be executed if this statement within the parentheses is true. The while loop is used in cases when we don't know exactly how many repetitions will be required for this block of statements. That is, for instance, we know what is the condition that will make these statements to be executed. However, we don't know when this condition will cease to be true. So this is to give it kind of a unlimited repetitions that will execute over and over until this condition is false. Okay, now let's do a practice code for the while loop. First of all, let's create an integer variable called a and give it the value of 0. Then write the reserved word while, two parentheses, and two curly brackets. Okay, now we are going to set the condition as a less than 3. Okay, so as long as the value of a is less than 3, we are going to execute the operations that we place here inside the brackets. So let's use the printf and let's print the following message. Type a number, a new line. Okay, so we're going to ask for typing a number, and whenever we type the number with our keyboard, we are going to use the scanf function we already saw in previous videos. Remember, scanf, then within the double quotation you write the format specifier. What type of datum are you receiving from the keyboard? A number, because I asked a number. Then comma, the ampersand sign, and then you are going to place here the name of the variable that will store that value received from the keyboard. In this case, it is an integer variable, and we are going to store it in a integer variable. Okay, so as for a number, and let's place it here in a. Remember, now it will change the value of a according to what I type in my keyboard. So in the next repetition, this while will compare the value of a to be less than 3. If it is, it will repeat this again and again till the value of a is it's not less than 3. That is, it has a greater value than 2. Okay, so let's run it, and here we have type a number. Okay, so I'm going to type negative number, and it will repeat because it is already it is still less than 3. Now let's type the number 2. It's less than 3, so it will continue to repeat. Now I type 1. It will repeat over and over until I type a number that is you know, it's not less than 3. So for instance, let's write 3. and enter. As you can see, it finished the program because now a is not less than 3. Now it's equal to 3. So this expression now here is false because it is receiving the value from our keyboard and storing the value in a. So it will change the value of a according to what I type in my keyboard. And since I type a number that is not less than 3, this expression will become false because now a is 3. 3 is not less than 3. So now this is false, and this will end the execution of this while.
The next loop is the do while loop. Unlike the previous while loop, in this case the block of statements is going to be executed first prior to the check condition. So we will start by executing this block of statements. Now we are going to check the condition next. If it's true, it's going to be repeated these operations, and if it's false, it will exit the loop. Okay, so it basically it's said to execute at least once, because in the first run we just execute the statements unconditionally. However, for the next run we will check the condition. If it's true, it will be repeated. Otherwise, it will exit the loop. So the format or syntaxes for the do while loop is this reserved word do, then the two curly braces, and within this curly brackets we will write the statements to be executed, and in the end we write while on these two parentheses, which will hold the condition to be tested in order to repeat these statements within the do. This loop is used whenever we want a piece of code to be executed at least once, just like in here. Let's say for the beginning of the program you need some processes to be executed, and then will be repeated again in the program depending of certain conditions. So it basically they use that this dual loop.
Okay, now let's do an example for the do while loop. So I'm going to use the same statements here. However, remember that we start by writing do, then the curly brackets and operations, and at the end the test, which is the while and this parenthesis. And I forgot to tell you that we finished this part by semicolon. Okay, don't forget that. Okay, so now we are going to start. I just want to show you that this part of do is going to be executed at least once without checking, the statement to be true or false. So for that purpose, I'm going to write a false statement. Now 8 equals 8, okay? So now a is not less than 3. It's false because a is now 8, okay? So this is not going to execute. However, remember that the first time it will be executed regardless of this value because it will not be tested until the end. So it's executed, then it will test and it will say false, and it won't be executed for the second time, but the first one will be executed normally. Okay, so it will say type a number. Okay, so although it is false, it already executed this first part. Type a number. So let's type a number that is, for instance, less than 3. Let's hit enter, and it will repeat type a number. Why? Because now a is actually less than 3 because I assigned the number of 2. Remember that this scanf will collect this value into a variable. Okay, so if I proceed just like before, any number that is less than 3, I won't have any troubles. However, when I type the value of any value that is equal or greater than 3, it will finish. As you can see here, it will finish this loop.
The third loop is the for loop. In this loop, we will also check for a condition to be true or false. If it's true, we are going to execute the block of statements. If it's false, we are going to exit the loop. Remember that the purpose of loops is to repeat or iterate a block of statements. However, the main difference between the for loop and do and do while loops is that in the do and do while loops, you will execute this block of statements as long as the condition is true. However, in this for loop, the purpose is to repeat this block of statements a limited number of times, and that is by implementing a counter variable. So we're going to initialize a integer variable, and we're going to increment it every time that we repeat the block of statements. Once this variable has been incremented as much times as this statement has been iterated, the check condition will find out that we've reached the maximum number of repetitions and will exit the loop, okay? So here we have one condition, which is the initialization value for that variable. Then we are going to check if this variable is still within the range of repetitions. If it is, it's going to execute the statements, and at the end of this execution will be incremented by 1, and it's going to be checked again in the next repetition. If it hasn't already reached the maximum amount of repetitions, it will repeat over and over again, always being incremented at the end to keep record of how many times it's been repeated, this process, okay? Whenever it reaches its maximum value, it will leave the loop. Okay, so whenever you know the maximum number of times that a particular process has to be repeated, then you use the for loop instead of do or do while. The syntax for is the word for, and within this parentheses, there are the three control statements, and within these curly brackets, the statements that are going to be repeated, okay? So the initialization will tell in which number it's going to start that variable counter. And the test condition will ensure that this counter hasn't reached the maximum value. It hasn't reached the maximum value. Okay, then do the statements. Whenever it has reached the maximum value, it will not execute the statements. It will go out from the loop, okay? However, if it hasn't reached the maximum number of repetitions, it will do these statements, and at the end of this statement will increment or update the value of that variable, and will be tested again. If it is under the maximum number of repetitions, it will repeat the statements, and at the end it's going to update. So every time it's going to be incremented, and whenever it reaches the maximum here, it will leave the loop, okay?
Okay, now let's do a practice code for the for loop. First of all, I'm going to create the integer variable called a, and now let's proceed with the for. So let's write the reserved word for, then two parentheses, two curly brackets. Within here, we're going to place the operations that we want to repeat in each repetition or iteration of the for. Okay, so I'm going to print the message of the number is, and I'm going on the new line to next line, and the value that I'm going to place here, it's going to be the numeric value of the counter variable, which is a. Okay, now remember that we start with initialization value. So the counter value is a. I will initialize it to 0, then semicolon, then the condition that will be tested in order to run a iteration of this for. So as long as a is less than 5, I'm going to execute these lines within the curly brackets, okay? So initialization, then semicolon, then the condition for the repetition of this loop, and the update statement. In this case, we are incrementing one unit every time, okay? So as I was telling you, we are going to do a limited number of repetitions here. So we are going to repeat from 0 up to less than 5, which would be 4. So from 0 up to 4, we will have 5 repetitions, okay? And in each repetition, we are going to print the current value of the counter variable, which is a. So in the first one, we start with the value of 0, okay? Remember how what's the order for this? First of all, initialization, which is 0. Then we are going to do the test. Is this condition, this statement, true? If it is, let's execute these lines. Okay, so now that a is 0, this is true. A is less than 5, so let's execute this one. Okay, once we execute all of these lines here, we are going to increment the value of a, okay? This is the order. However, whenever we check this as true, execute this part, and then increment the value of a, and this is not less than 5, this statement will be false. This part won't be executed, neither this part will be updated or incremented, okay? So this is the order, don't forget. And let's click run. Remember that it's this new line in every of the repetitions. The first value will be 0 because this is the initial value of a. Let's click run, and here it is. The number is 0 in the first run. Because it is less than 5, it will be executed, okay? And at the end of this part of the print, it will increment the value of a to 1, okay? So in the next one, it will test. It is still less than 5. Yes, it is. It's now 1. Okay, print the value, which is 1. And then at the end, increment now to the value of 2. Then check again. It is less than 5. Yes, it is. Print the value of 2. And then increment this part. And whenever it is the value of 3, at the end, it will be incremented again to the value of 4, okay? And in this part, it's going to be compared again. It is less than 5. Yes, it is. So print the value of 4. And then, since we print the value of 4, I mean this operation, now it's going to be incremented to the value of 5, okay? But what happens whenever it tries to repeat the next operation, it will find out, okay, it's a less than 5. No, it's now 5. It was incremented from 4 to 5. So now this expression is false, so it won't enter this part. It won't be executed anymore, and this part won't be incremented. So it finished with the value of 5, and this statement became false, and no, this part is now not executed, nor this part, okay? Okay, for the update sentence, you can also use the decrement operator, okay? So let's say, for instance, I'm going to now we're going to decrement the value of a, and remember, it will always execute this part as long as a is less than 5. So see what it does. Let's run it. As you can see, it's continuously throwing negative numbers, and it is because the start value was 0, okay? So it is less than 5, yes it is. And it prints the number, the current number. However, now it's going to be -1 because it is decremented. And it will be checked again. It is less than 5, yes it is, it's -1. So again, print the value of -1 and then decrement it at the end by minus to be -2, and so on and so forth. And remember what is happening here. This is less than 5, so every negative number will be less than 5 because it's even less than 0. So this is why it's running continuously. So it is in an infinite loop because it will be always be less than 5 because we are decrementing it. Okay. Okay, now let's do a more organized and more useful application of for. Now we're going to decrement, or we are going to start from a higher value. From 5 up to 0, let's say. Let's assign the value of 5, and as long as a is is let's say greater than or equal to 0, it will print the current value of a. Then after it will decrement the value of a. Remember that when it is now um, greater than or equal to 0. Now bear in mind that the condition is greater than or equal to 0. So whenever it reaches the value of 0, it will be still true. However, for the next iteration, it will be -1 when decremented, and this will be false. So it will exit the loop. And we have the first number, that is 5, that it's still true, so it will be decremented by 1 unit, and so this will be executed. And when it's executed, the value of a will be decremented, sorry, and we will have the next results. As I was telling you, the last number will be 0, in which case it's going to be decremented, and when it's decremented for the next repetition, it will find out, okay, in this first test, now -1 is not greater or equal to 0. So it will stop the execution of the loop 4, and the program will end. Also bear in mind that we can do increments, decrements, and also increment or decrement by a different number than just by unit. So we are going to start with the maximum value of a, and in each repetition we are going to decrement the value of a um, by 2. Okay, so remember, this is the assignment that's going to be the value of a -2, so it will be decremented by 2 units. Okay, this is the an assignment expression of subtraction, no, of 2 units. So we'll start with the value of 10. It should be printing value of a is 10, then it's going to be decremented to 8, and then it's going to be checked. That is always a value that is greater than or equal to 0. So whenever it reaches 0, it will be uh, the last repetition. Okay. So as you can see, it says the number is 10, then it will be decremented by 2 to 8, then to 6, 4, 2, and to 0. Remember that this will be the last because once it is decremented from 2 and you subtract the value of 2, you will have 0. And once you test here, you will have the value of 0. Okay, it is still greater or equal to 0. So it will print 0. However, in the next one will be 0 minus 2, and it will be -2, the result. Okay, so it's going to compare here again and says, okay, -2 is not equal or greater than 0. So it will end the execution. However, you can do also that for increment. You can do increments by any number that you need using this assignment operator, just like in here. It starts from 0, and it will be incremented by 2, as long as it says a is equal or greater than 0. So let's say, as you can see, it's continuously doing this increment because this is the rule. Every positive number that's going to be incremented over and over will be greater than 0. So let's stop this code, and now let's say whenever it is, let's say less than or equal to 10. So whenever it reaches the value of 10, it will stop. Okay. Now this is different because this is like a limit. I'm not saying just greater than 10 or equal, but actually is less or equal to 10. So this is the maximum value that can be reached for this for loop. Now it's 0, 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10. This is the last one because in the next increment it will be incremented to 12, which is not less nor equal to 10. So this is the end, okay, of that loop. Okay, now one more thing about this. Just like in the if, we can make use of this indentation that I just told you. You don't need the curly brackets if you are going to use just only one a single statement. Okay, if you are using 2, 3, or more, you will need the curly brackets. Okay, so have a look here. It's repeating just like before because it is just a single statement that depends on this for loop. Okay, you can use this same property for the do while, and you will do the same. You just if it is a single statement, or for the while. Remember that, okay? And also remember that in the if we were evaluating if some expression was true. If it is true, it will be executed, but just once, no? In the if. Remember that. However, in this loops, we are going to evaluate this expression and we'll repeat every time the expression is true, okay? And in the for, we are going to evaluate and repeat the expression as long as it is true, but it is also within the ranges or the maximum number of repetitions, okay, for the for loop.
There are some implementations of loops in which a series of statements are going to be repeated over and over, and the statement evaluated will always be true. So the execution of the loop, it's not going to end, but it will be an infinite loop. So it will keep running forever. So let's say, for instance, this while expression. Since it just evaluates expression as true for executing this block of statements, this expression is a constant number, 1, which is always true. So it will continue to execute the statements over and over. However, there can be some other implementations in which the while loop runs forever, infinitely. However, it does not have inside statements inside of it. So it will basically will be doing nothing or like waiting, okay? This is another format for while in which, just like before, it does not have any statements inside, so you can remove this curly brackets and replace this by a semicolon that will tell that it has no body inside, not um, any instructions. So it basically stays there doing nothing, like waiting. And here's the for in its infinite loop form. It will take no control statements, but actually it means that it will keep running forever. However, it's missing just the semicolon here for it to be right in syntaxes. However, you can implement also a infinite for in this shape and with the curly brackets and statements inside of it.
Okay, now let's have a look at the infinite loops. There are some ways in which you can make your the condition to be evaluated in your loop always true. So in that case, the instructions or operations inside your loop will be executed forever. It will be repeated and it won't leave the loop. So let's say, for instance, this while, which says while. Let's. This is the test value, the value to be tested. And if I write the plain one, this value will always be true because it's not changing. It's not a variable that will change its contents. So this message will be printed forever if I run this program. The number is 2, 2, 2. Remember that a now equals 2, and it will be repeated forever, okay? So the other way, it's an infinite loop, but that is a void loop. As you can see here, it's doing nothing. It will keep all the time doing nothing, as you can see, because it has no statements inside. It won't perform any operations. So the other form is writing this, removing this curly brackets and leaving just a semicolon. It says while one and semicolon, which means that there is no body for that f because it is empty. It's just like the one that we wrote before, and it will do the same, nothing, continuously. Okay. Okay, let's stop this thing. And for the for statement, the infinite loop will be something like this. You write for, then the parentheses, and then these two semicolons. However, you are not going to introduce any of the three control statements. Just leave it that way. And here you place the operation that you want to perform forever, okay? As you can see, it's doing the same. Also, there can be a for which has nothing inside the body and will perform nothing forever, continuously. Or you can leave it this way also, and it will perform nothing again forever and ever. So these infinite loops are not useful in programs for computers. However, in embedded systems, I mean, some kind of microchips that have like a small processor and are used in electronic devices like microwave ovens, uh, TVs or something, in which they do always the same task, or even, for instance, let's say a digital clock, they will be doing the same. For instance, measuring time and beeping every hour, for instance. So for those cases are useful. So that's why I'm telling you that, but for you to know how to write them, you can have void infinite loops with nothing to do, or a particular task repeated over and over, okay?
The break statement is an useful statement to leave a structure or loop whenever a given condition occurs. So for instance, remember the break in the switch statement. We use it to leave the structure inside the switch whenever we executed a particular case. So this will help us to leave the execution of the loop in some cases that you can define. So we'll learn that in the next practice.
Okay, now let's finish with these two useful statements for loops. Break and continue. Let's start first with the break one. As we previously saw on the switch statement in decision making, break tells the flow of the program to leave that structure of switch. So if you use break within a loop, you can make this loop to finish. And okay, let's say for instance this example. this while, it will ask you to type a number and will store that number in the variable a, okay? And it will keep doing the same as long as a is not equal to 100, okay? So as you can see here, typing number, let's say this for instance. However, if I type 100, it will leave the loop, okay? There is another way to do that. I can use break to exit this loop upon a given condition. And for that purpose, I will have to use the if decision clause, okay? So I will say, for instance, if a equals to, let's say another number, because it is already 100. So let's say, for instance, if it is 80, if a equals to 80, then break, okay, inside the if. So let's run it. Okay, if I type a number which is 100, it will leave the loop. However, I can repeat the same for 80. So let's say, for instance, 17.8, it won't leave the loop. However, if I write now 80, sorry, it will leave the loop, as you can see here. Okay, so this is the use of the break. You have to combine the break with the if statement, and then you place here inside the condition for doing this break, for leaving this loop, okay, in another given condition. And also remember that we can use indentation since it's a single statement. We will have the same result. So let's see if it throws any error. No, it does not. 80. Okay.
The continue statement is used in loops for skip a particular iteration and continue to the next. So for instance, let's say that in every iteration you will execute a number of operations. So if you say, okay, for the fifth iteration or the sixth or wherever that you want, I want to skip that particular iteration and go to the next one. That is why continue statement is made for. We will learn more closely, more clearly in the next example.
Okay,
Practice.
now I'm going to show you how to use the continue statement. First of all, here we have a for loop, okay, and there's the counter value named a, okay. So if we print this, we will have the value of a as long as it is less than 10, okay. So from 0 up to 9, and will be incremented in its iteration. However, the continue statement is used to skip the current iteration and go to the next. So for instance, if I want to skip this value of 4, I will use the continue statement, so that whenever it is a equals 4, it will not print 4, or it's not going to execute all of the instructions here, will be skipped, and it's going to the next, in which the value is 5, and will execute the operations for that value, not for the current, which is 4, okay. So for instance, I have to use the continue statement also with the if statement, okay, because the if will help us to compare the value of a for which I want to continue or skip the iteration, okay. So whenever a reaches the value of 4, I'm going to skip it by using the continue, okay. Continue semicolon. So let's see what happens. Let's run it, and here we have 0, 1, 2, 3. We do not have 4, and then 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, so this is how it works. However, bear in mind something. If someone tells you, okay, check the values, and if the value is 4, do not print it, okay. However, if I do otherwise, for instance, I start to let's say first in the first place I print the value, I will be doing a mistake, because if it is 4, I will be printing the value normally, okay? And then the next step, I will check, why did I print 4? Oh, I made a mistake. I shouldn't be printing 4. So first of all, just like in real life, you check the things first, okay? And then you do the actual action, okay? That's what's going to happen here. If I place it in the wrong way, it will be tested whenever it's too late, because I already printed it. Okay, so let's see. As you can see, the forbidden value to be printed was 4. However, it was printed first. So in this place, it tries to do something, but it's not working. So first of all, check the value first, okay, for the right result. Now let's use the continue statement with while, okay? You will find something strange that happens here. So we are going to do the same. A equals 0 here. And as long as A is not 10, we are going to print the values of A, and we are incrementing every time. So it wants to start from 0, the next one will be incremented to 1, and so on and so forth up to 9, because we don't want the A equal to 10, okay? By this time, when A equals 10, it will exit this loop, okay? And so let's use again the if and the continue statement. Let's say for the same case, when A equals 4. Let's see what happens here. When A equals 4, I'll do first this check, okay, before printing the value. If A equals 4, then continue. So do not print 4, but continue to A equals 5, okay? And then the other one. So let's click run, and we will have an error. When we used continue inside a while or do while loop, we have to write just above the continue statement in the first place the next value of the iteration. So for instance, the next value, the current value is 4, so it's the value that will be ignored in this iteration. It's not going to be executed, okay, for that value. However, what's the next value, the next iteration that will be executed? It's when it's when A plus 1 that equals 5, okay? When A equals 5, it's going to be the next iteration, the one that it's not going to be skipped. So if you do not write here, you will have that error. Let's check again. Here we have 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And from then on, this loop will assume the same value for the rest of the iterations. It's like the value is stuck in 4. So that's why we do not have 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9. And even worse, it's not the program hasn't finished. It's like in an infinite loop. So we stop the simulation, and then we write here the next iteration that you must do is when A equals 5, okay? We are skipping just when A equals 4. That's not going to be printed. So let's click run, and there you go. 0, 1, 2, 3, not 4, then 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, so bear that in mind. For while and do while, you first use here in the if the next iteration, the next value for that variable that you are skipping, then the continue, and this will, skip this iteration of this operations for that particular value, and will continue to the next iteration.